Take a little walk to the edge of town and go across the track where the viaduct.
George
in New York.
You get to be the first caller.
All right.
Hook him up.
Mm-hmm. Can you hear us, George?
Oh, there it is.
All right.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, we've heard you the whole time.
All right.
No, you know what it was? I like an idiot, like an apologist. I had the website on in the background, so I was getting a weird a Doppler effect. And you were talking about the difference between people presenting formal apologetics arguments versus their personal experience, and I hate to say testimony, but that's what it is.
Yeah.
I think that's a good approach. For one thing, a lot of the formal apologetics or philosophical arguments are extremely complicated. And even if you have your ducks in a row, to present that sort of off the top of your head on a phone conversation is a little tricky. Those things, sometimes the content of something dictates the form of its presentation for optimal effect. Yeah. Some things need to be in writing. And you need to have time to sit there and with a cup of coffee and really read it at your own pace and chew over it, because there's a lot to go over, and it's not the kind of back and forth, the kind of badinage that works best when you have two people talking live.
See, one of the things that I'm looking forward to, but I'd like to get, and I have a laptop that's a tablet so that you can write on it. I'd actually like to get a video output of that so that you could draw diagrams and have them appear behind us or instead of us in order to, make some of the more complicated arguments a little simpler.
Any collaborative whiteboard application.
Yeah, only I don't want it to be collaborative. I'm the only one that gets to touch the whiteboard.
It's imagine this mighty lightboard.
Just like House.
Don't you dare touch.
Yeah, those would be some interesting graphics, let me tell you.
Unless I got a Vicodin overdose, nobody else is getting my marker for the whiteboard.
Yeah.
And also because as you guys have already encountered more than once, most of the apologists really don't have their story straight. And I'm not saying this to be a wise ass, but the cold fact is they don't have their own story, most of them, and they say the most outrageous things, or as you've discovered, they say things that really don't have any relevance to them.
Yeah.
Because when you ask them, why are you an XYZ, they never say, well, one day I was in the library and I was, reading through, the case for Christ, and Lee Strobel said this, and I said, oh, goodness, he's correct.
Yeah.
Almost nobody has that story.
Right. That was my whole bugaboo with people who do these little cut-paste emails that they send us where, like, oh, here's tag, or here's the column, or here's the ontological argument, or what have you. I am almost entirely certain that, in almost 100% of cases, that was not the thing that made them Christian, right? And if that was not the thing that converted them, then my question is, well, why are you sending this to us? Right. Why not just tell us what converted you? Why assume that would not be good for us? Are you sending us this because you don't think that what converted you is actually a good enough set of reasons to convert? And you think that we need this on top of what it was that converted you, or exactly what is your reasoning? And
it may be, just as a thought, it may be because they correctly discern that there is such an element of subjectivity in that kind of a story.
Yeah.
If you say to someone, I had a personal, transcendent, metaphysical experience, and I say, oh, really? Prove it. Well, there we are. I suspect the reason many of them will hit you with historiography or philosophy is because they sense that there is a mutual arena you can both enter into there and see who makes the more solid case. Whereas if I say, God talked to me last night, he said everything's going to be okay, how do you know? Am I nuts? Am I lying? Am I completely on the level? There's simply no way to discern that empirically.
Yeah, and I'd say that, to kind of summarize what all three of us have said, what I think happens in the overwhelming majority of the cases, and I'd estimate 99 if not higher, is somebody comes to believe in a particular God claim or a particular set of religious precepts, and then for whatever reason, a reason that is not intellectual, that is not evidence-based, it's whether you're raised in that religion or you've had some experience or you've exercised some fallacy or you've had some perhaps real experience that you attribute to that God. And then later on, when you realize that you're going to need to explain this to other people, you find things that seem to reaffirm your beliefs. As a Christian, reading, for example, Josh McDowell's Evidence That Demands a Verdict, if that's all you actually read, and if you don't analyze it critically, that is probably one of the single best books to reaffirm your perspective on the truth. As a Christian, when I read Josh McDowell, it was like, well, duh. Now all this stuff that I've been taught, here's the justification for it, and my beliefs are rationally justified. It wasn't, and the same is true to some extent for Lee Strobel's books. It wasn't until I actually said, until I read people who challenged the assertions of these guys, that I began to assess the actual arguments. McDowell and the others do a very good job of preaching to the choir.
They do, and also one of the things that my experience with both McDowell and Strobel was that once I learned something about Bible history and began to study it critically, or as a text, as you would study
Right.
Greek mythology once I began to approach it anthropologically, as opposed to reading it or reflecting on it as a believer, I became very upset with both of them and with other apologists, because you can start seeing the tricks they're playing.
Yeah.
And in the case of Josh McDowell, he's a smart enough guy. I don't think some of these people have done serious work. They have studied history. They're good debaters, and you know that he knows that there are problems with what he's saying unless you share his assumptions.
Yeah,
but he's deliberately he's holding that card under his shirt, and you almost wish he would say, "Look, I'm a believer, and this is my reason why, but I acknowledge that people who don't come where I'm coming from, this will not be convincing." If they would just say that out loud, I'd have more respect for them, as opposed to pretending that this is some airtight case they're making, and the only reason why I, or you for that matter, or Martin or any of us, don't agree with it is because we're acting in, if you'll excuse the expression, bad faith.
Yeah.
We just don't want to accept it.
Yeah, we're just being rebellious and
Right.
denialist about the whole
Yeah.
thing, and that's an excellent point. And but at the same time, I would say there's probably a very good reason why they don't just come flat out and admit, that these arguments aren't enough on their own to persuade anyone who is a pretty solid unbeliever, because then, well, what have they done? They've just taken all the power away from it. I mean, it's one thing to, part of, I think, what gives it that power towards people who are already believers, when they hear these arguments, that McDowell make and that Strobel make, and that to someone who is already very solid in their Christian beliefs, will go, wow, okay, well, here's all the rational justification for my beliefs. But if you present one of those arguments, but at the same time then say, but this isn't good enough to convince an atheist, well, then that I think would throw the believer into a bit of confusion in the sense of saying, but it sounds really good, but at the same time you're already admitting that it's not.
They're asserting that absent the personal experience that they've had, the evidence alone supports them. And that's an assertion that I don't buy. And George, on that note, I'm going to let you go because we want to try and get as many Skype callers in as we can today, but I greatly appreciate you calling in. And
yeah, it's awesome to talk to you all the time.
Martin and
George.
I are
Thank
doing
you.
it on the love seat, but you were our first.
Love seat.
Well.
yes.
Hey, 3, biblically significant.
That's right.
That's very true.
All right, good luck, guys. Take care.
Thanks again.
Walk to the edge of town and go across the track where the viaduct